Exceptional Radio. It's episode 2424. It's beautiful out. It's like 54 degrees. It's sunny. Like really pretty out. I want to emphasize how nice it is for, what is this, February? It's supposed to be winter. Well, that was random. That really wasn't random. It's not random. I said it was random at this point. So I've been looking at the price of computers lately because, you know, it's been on the collective consciousness, I believe. And well, let me start at the beginning of my list. Here's a 1,000-watt power supply, an 80-plus gold modular desktop power supply for $109. When the price of power supplies drop down to that point, what the heck's going on? Because that should be a really expensive power supply. And then here's a 12th gen i5 with a RTX 3060 card for $800. That seems about the going rate. 12th gen i5 3060, just shy of 8. This one, Ryzen whole machine, Ryzen 5 3060, 12 gigabyte, 16 gigabytes of RAM, just under $1,000. RTX 3070 system with a 12th gen i7, $1,600. See, that seems about right. Refurbished Dell. Here we go. A Ryzen 5 system with a RTX 3060, $650. Legion, I have no idea who they are. Ryzen 7, RTX 4070, $1,200. That seems like a pretty damn good deal. With 16 gigabytes of RAM. DDR5 RAM. That's a barnstormer. Obviously, these are all gaming machines. I don't think a 4070 is even necessary yet. I mean, short of building like a full-on like multi-display flight simulator with a cockpit accurate simulation, like I don't understand. I can't see how anyone would need a 4000 series card of any kind. Like, I haven't, everything that I've seen from what I've gleaned from the internet, of course, like a 3060 is practically overkill for almost anything that's available right now. Like a 2070 might be more than sufficient for everything that's available right now.
The latest possible moment. So that's where the market, the way that free market utopians think that the market is going to work, it actually is working the exact opposite now in terms of the AAA companies have created an artificial ceiling on game performance and game, I guess we'll call it photorealism, in that because they're focused on profit and not the advancement of the player experience on the medium, we're not getting the most advanced experience. We're getting the most profitable experience. And I think ultimately there is a problem there in that media wasn't always this way. There was a time when taking a risk on the media financially was not also putting the company at risk for long-term failure, where now you look at Warner Brothers and Paramount, and it's like every piece of media they put out is what the company's most recent stock report is hinging upon. And that's not really good for creative intellectual property, because that's where, I mean, it's just the proof. Like, we have the proof now. It's not something we can even really debate, because people can go look back when there was a Nintendo seal of approval that they would put on their games because they were trying to do quality control on the experience. And in turn, that meant even if it was like one person making the entire game, that person was still going to get enough funding to complete the game and push something that was completed. So we're in a very different paradigm where they don't even have to push completed games. They have a deadline, and if the game's not done, many times the executives will force the developers to push a game out instead of actually just finishing the game. Looks a side eye at Cyberpunk 2077. Because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was playing Cyberpunk yesterday, but I only bought it 3 years after launch because it took that long for that game to actually be the game that they had promised on launch. And it was like, I never played. I tend to do this with new games. I don't play them until they've had at least 3 or 4 patches, at least for optimization's sake. But a lot of times it's like the game will just be pushed out broken because they're cutting corners on play testing. So the first people who buy the games are actually doing the beta testing a lot of times, even though it's supposed to be a full completed game. And that's where I'm like, I've seen this progression, which is also where having, none of my GPUs are over a 3070 because nobody needs anything more than a 3070. to be future proof for at least 3 or 4 years out.
So the game I play, Star Trek Online, it's 14 years old. Holy shit! It was released in February 2nd, 2010. I've been playing this game with like what is it? Onboard graphics for the past couple of years now on like a Dell All-in-One or a Micro Tower, and it was fine because it was just fine. I didn't really think about it. And then recently I powered up an old machine with a 1050 card, and oh my god, it's like I can see. I'm serious. It's like going from 80s cartoons to CGI. I had completely forgotten just what actual GPUs are capable of. And this is like when did the 1050 come out? See, that was released 2016.
Yeah, it's insane.
I'm running it at 4K.
Made in the last two series.
I'm running it in 4K. Everything's on max graphics. It looks stunning. It doesn't chirp. It doesn't blip. It doesn't do any weird shit. I got an 8-year-old GPU with 2 gigabytes of RAM that's running a 14-year-old game at full everything, and it's gorgeous. And all I do is wait for the quarterly story update, or the I don't know, irregular or seasonal event type shit, where they inject some extra stuff and give away things. But an 18-year-old or an 8-year-old card can play a 14-year-old game at 4K with full everything on, just full tilt, ultra graphics. I'm not convinced. Man, I need to run that game on the 1660 Super, see what it does.
Well, and that's where the optimization comes into play, because they've had 14 years to optimize. So now it's like, yeah, you could run it with an onboard GPU, but when you use an external or like
a dedicated GPU,
it's fucking gonna take it to this level where when they originally put out that game, that's what they probably had in their minds, but the technology wasn't able to bring it to that level at the time. And that's, I think it's the same kind of deal with Cyberpunk, in that the base level GPUs that were on the market when they first put the game out weren't really able to handle it. But now the mid-level GPUs are like, oh, you can run Cyberpunk on psycho settings with like 79 frames per second and not really have any problems. And it's like, that's not the highest level GPU, but this was also a game that was like breaking GPUs 3 years ago. But the optimization has come so far, and it's like seeing, because then there was another one, Jedi Survivor. That game was like unplayable at launch, but not because it was pushing the boundaries of the processors. It was just not optimized at all. And I may go back and visit it soon. But it was just such a terrible experience where these AAA companies are putting out fucking expensive crap, and then they're like making it seem as if it's NVIDIA's fault that the game isn't pushing the limits of the card. And so they're both pointing the finger at each other, where it's like NVIDIA shouldn't have flooded the market with overpowered GPUs.
So here's my understanding of how NVIDIA really like developed into the behemoth that they've become. When gamers started really buying up GPUs, NVIDIA in kind started turning out better GPUs, but it turned out that the scientific community was also like, wait a second, we use this stuff for physical modeling. These things are getting amazing. So gamers essentially financed the development for GPUs that were capable of doing like geological modeling, and like astrophysics modeling, fluid dynamics modeling, like really complex stuff, things that are like beyond where the math is beyond most people. I mean, most people, myself included, probably have to look at a churning diagram of sprites floating around a screen, little pixels dancing on a screen to visualize that kind of data. And these GPUs are incredibly capable of doing this stuff. That's what they're really for. It's not so people can play a video game. A video game's never going to come close to taxing that GPU the way that the physical modeling system will. It's like a joke compared to what like actual scientific research software will do to a GPU. It's definitely the gaming software development team's fault for developing software that cannot extract the absolute power and capability out of a GPU. Because if some scientists in a room can come up with some code to run, in pure text, and then hit enter, and then boom, data starts compiling, and then they visualize all that stuff. And some of those models are running like continuously. They're not just running once and outputting data. They're like churning non-stop because they have to run consistent models of like the Earth's weather. I'd like to see what was that thing that people used to ask? Can it run Crisis? I'd like to see a Crisis machine like run meteorological modeling software, like the physical modeling software. I bet it would be amazing because gaming machines are typically like race cars. I bet it would be fucking awesome. But I bet that gaming machine isn't running a stack of like, I don't know what they're even using anymore. At one point, they were selling these gigantic rack unit, like single unit Tesla GPUs that didn't even have output. They just crunched numbers. Computer game developers wouldn't even know how to code for that.
This is also where like the technology, like you're saying, they would do these things to make it seem as if they're expanding GPU functionality for gaming. Like what was it, SLI, where you could hook two
then
GPUs
3 and
together,
then 4,
and 3 and 4, and obviously they could use it for crypto mining, but no games were ever actually developed. I think there were maybe 1 or 2 that actually used that function. So there would be these functions that they would keep adding that developers just weren't implementing because either they didn't need to, or there was a way they could do the effect without using that expanded functionality. And so like ray tracing is not that in that one of the benefits of ray tracing is then developers not having to add like all of the calculations for the lighting. It's like if you put a light source, the ray tracing automatically does it, and that cuts down a lot of time to get accurate lighting, which is effectively one of the most important aspects of making something look photorealistic.
Oh yeah, especially if you want dynamic lighting.
Right. Or dynamic reflections. And so that was something that it's still catching up, but it was made to seem as if it was one of those frivolous technological additions. So they're doing a bad job of separating between or differentiating between what's useful to the gamer and what's novel to try to bump their stock value. And I think that's, once again, I'm blaming the market for that type of behavior, but it's also like when the gamers are in these tribes and then the PC tribe is also like heavily NVIDIA versus AMD, like Radeon, it's like, it's really hard to get good outcomes when you have these tribes that are then dictating the market response because they're not rational responses. It's like emotions in a place where it's meant to be logical and rational decision making obviously is not good, but it's almost impossible for humans to separate them out, but they perpetually try to do that. So
So there's a
it's a
there's a game you mentioned ray tracing and specifically about the way that reflections are generated, how it's a generative process to enable dynamic lighting in a way that's more realistic. There's a game that's been in development, like it's just regular announcements and all that kind of stuff. It's called Unrecord, and it's like a body cam SWAT team type game where you run into a building and you take out the bad guys. And from all of the video or the screenshots and the limited game footage, it looks a lot like a real body cam. It's almost nausea inducing just from the limited video that's available on Steam. But that's the kind of thing that takes advantage of that kind of technology, of dynamic lighting, where the sun's not in one place the whole time through the course of gameplay. It's actually moving through the sky. And that influences the global light, the ambient light in the game. And then anywhere where there is like an opening, a window, or a flashlight, all these things have influence over the textures in the game. And this is one of the craziest, it looks real. It looks like a YouTube video of police storming into a building and like a SWAT team storming. Well, it's only one person, but a law enforcement officer with a firearm running into a building and shooting at people. And it's obviously a game because of the way that certain dynamics work, but visually it's just that's
where like that game it's definitely using the Unreal 5 to the fullest extent,
but it's still in TBA status. Like,
well, but if you like watch it when other characters come on screen, it's like it's great from the perspective of the player when nothing is happening, but the movement is still in the uncanny valley and it hasn't quite crossed it yet. So there's this element of like, I mean, and it's not even about it being perfect so much as like, I think I want to say the reason that game hasn't put out a demo or put out a playable demo is because what they limited the perspective to is obviously like the best they have. And like, the more you look at it, the more it's like, okay, this is definitely a game. But I think it's like, we're at that, it's at the front of the threshold where games will start to push that. But I think it's like, because the studio doing it is like not very big.
No.
The best they're probably going to do is get people hyped about the potential for the technology, and like they'll probably never deliver a game that is
I think that
to deliver on those expectations.
I think anything that they've created is just proof of concept, and they're hoping that a larger game studio is going to buy them or absorb them.
That's and unfortunately that's happened so many times in gaming, whether it's like to get fundraising or to sell to a bigger company, that it's like, that's where I'm cautiously optimistic about the potential for the tech of Unreal 5, but I don't believe that this small of a studio is going to be able to deliver.
They need like Halo money
at this quality.
They need Halo money to actually deliver this product. Like Halo, if it looked like this, it'd be so amazing. Halo's already an amazing game franchise, but or GTA. If GTA looked like this, holy crap. think GTA has been on its own path this whole time, though.
Oh, definitely.
Because it has a very unique variation of third-person gameplay.
And especially looking at the way they're trying to build a mythos, but also like a world that has changed over time, being the same universe. Like, world building is not easy, and being able to build out a world over multiple iterations, I think, is where GTA and Red Dead Redemption are in this sort of unique class of AAA game that Halo maybe has. There's only a few games that actually make it to that level in the social zeitgeist.
I think of GTA and Red Dead as the same game, just in different portions of history.
Right, of course, but it's there's also different dynamics in that different period. So it's like, obviously they use some of the same game mechanics, but given the way that it's obviously like 150 something years, whatever, 175 years apart, it's not just a clone. And I think there's enough
oh no, it's definitely not the same. You don't play it all the same way. A lot of it's very similar, though.
Rockstar put out a game, like, I think it was called Mayhem or something, where it was clearly a watered down version of GTA that was a clone that was even less mechanics. And it was like a terrible, it's fun for 5 minutes. And then you're like, okay, this is definitely not worth a full price game.
Mirror Park Mayhem, is that it?
Let me check.
Path to Mayhem. Now I'm curious. I want to. Some of the most fun periods of gameplay of GTA that I've ever experienced have just been going off script and just blowing everything up, steal an airplane, crash into buildings.
It was called State of Emergency. That's my bad. State of Emergency. Oh, it was. Yeah, Rockstar published it, but it was developed by Viz Entertainment. So that's where I'm like,
oh, this is old.
Yeah, 2002. It was terrible. It was fucking terrible. Where I'm like, that was one of the first times I felt like, oh, this company took.
Wait, this is like going to a mall brawler style. Just beat up as many people as you can, break shit.
They just took the violence from GTA and basically isolated it out. And that's where I'm like, did you ever play the Warriors game?
I'm sure I did, but I don't think I would have played it for very long.
It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad because it had enough of its own mechanic attempt to make it different than anything else that the same company had put out. But that's where, again, like, the State of Emergency game, I couldn't even remember the fucking name of it because it's so inconsequential. Wait, at the same time,
I've got one. Can you remember the name of the zombie game that takes place in a mall? Dead Rising.
I mean, I remember the movie.
Yeah, Dead Rising is a video game. It's about zombies, and you kill them in a mall. So it's basically like Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, I never played that one.
Yeah, I vaguely recalled it, playing it one time, thinking it was terrible. I mean, the whole like zombie game thing is its own genre at this point.
Yeah.
How long can you survive dumb shit? But I think that's another variation of GTA for me, where it's just man against environment or player versus environment, but this is one where the environment's like collapsing in on itself. I know
Well,
people. I know that there's a gamer out there. There are a lot of gamers out there who really enjoy the zombie survival timed experience. I just don't get it. Wave after
so
wave after wave of stuff.
I feel like for the type of online multiplayer game, that's why Call of Duty Zombies works really well. That type of approach is something that is, multiple waves. If somebody's really into like grinding, I can get that, but it's also not. There's usually not a lot of storylines built around it, and that's where I
Yeah.
think Resident Evil may be one of the more storyline filled zombie-ish games in game history, which is why I think it's persisted. Um, but
It's funny. I don't think of it as a zombie story so much as I think of it as like, I guess it is a virus. It creates mutants. They're basically zombies. Like that mutant shark in the first Resident Evil. I didn't think of like all of that stuff was horrible experimentation. I guess they did engage in raising the dead, sort of.
well, and it's games like that and like Silent Hill where I just can never get into a situation where a game would put you in like a supernatural or some sort of superhuman situation, but you don't get those extra abilities. Like you can just get a gun, but the zombies, you have to shoot them in the head to die. So it's like I can understand the impetus for that type of approach, but I don't like those types of movies either, just because it's like arbitrary, asymmetric abilities is like an easy way to stack the cards to make it seem like there's something happening, but it's just asymmetry. And that's where I'm like, I don't need to see asymmetry because the only thing that would be novel about asymmetry is overcoming it, which is arbitrary. So it's just really hard. Like I can't get into like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or the Saw or the like Jeepers Creepers or anything like that, just because the writing just feels too lazy to me. Like asymmetry, at least in the Nightmare on Elm Street, is not actually asymmetrical because when we got to the Dream Warriors, we realized people could fight back and use the dreams and have powers, but they just hadn't been doing it yet. So it's
Yeah.
like even Freddy wasn't actually asymmetrical. Or not completely asymmetrical because
You know, my
he had
biggest
more experience, but you still could like fight him on in that plane.
it's Nightmare on Elm Street's an interesting example because it's hard to know what kind of decisions you can even make when you're in a dream if you don't realize it's a dream. In the theory, of course. Whereas like Halloween, where Michael Myers just he walks really slow, and you could be sprinting like Usain Bolt sprinting for as long as you possibly could, and the second you stop to take a breather and bend over and hock a loogie or whatever, because none of these people in these movies actually sprint like that in real life. They look up and there he is. Like same thing with Jason from the what was it, Friday the 13th movie series. That dude doesn't run, but he somehow appears right behind people. And then in all of those movies, the characters just make the worst decisions imaginable. Every opportunity to make the right decision, they make the wrong decision. And then there's the whole Scream genre, which lampoons that, and in the process does the same things. Horror movies are weird. I really liked the stuff that was coming out of Japan and Korea for a while, like in the, I guess, the 2000s. But that was only because it was different. And then eventually Hollywood started mirroring that kind of storytelling.
Oh, I don't know
They
what
just flat out
happened,
remade a lot of Japanese and Korean horror movies.
but something happened with horror where there used to be plots in the horror films, and there used to be characters that had motivations beyond the killer just wanting to kill people and scare people, or the teenager that just wanted to have sex. Because if you go back and look at like Hellraiser or um, Phantasm, like there are there's gore porn, there's horror, there's thrillers, and sometimes they all overlap. But gore porn became its own thing at some point where I think people tended to call it horror, but it was really not actual horror in that it was all about the gore and the violence, and the plot was like secondary to the violence. And I don't know if it was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre has a plot, um, but the gore is really the star. So I don't know, I don't care enough about horror because it's like a weird genre to me and like what people are trying to get from it. So I've never really gotten into studying it all that much. Um, but there's certain films that I've gone back and watched the entire series because I'm like, oh, this is actually really well executed in terms of the philosophical framework of they're trying to explore good versus evil, but it's obviously not always black and white. And that's where I think it's so with Hellraiser explicitly, the Cenobites are always like framed like, oh, we're not angels or demons, but we seek the pleasure, and it's like it's the most extreme version of pleasure seekers.
They're
In
hedonists.
well, but in that they it's beyond hedonism in that once you become a Cenobite, you're like the end of your pleasure seeking is boundless. So I it's like a level beyond hedonism that they are compulsed. It's a compulsion to the point that it becomes an unbearable pain. But they in the pleasure seeking, that's the paradox of the Cenobite is that it becomes pleasurable to them. So that's like it's like I think like bondage was really new to people at the time, so they're trying to make this bondage theme horror, but in the process it's really exploring the framework of where like consensual pleasure stops being pleasurable even if it's painful when that person's consenting to it, because it's like this is like I think to me where fighting there's like a stark contrast between consensual violence and non-consensual violence. So like somebody who gets paid and has signed a contract to get into a fight is in an extremely different scenario than somebody who gets into a confrontation where they didn't want to get into that confrontation, and now suddenly they're fighting in a place where they never actually had that intention. Those are two completely different scenarios, even though they're both violence. So in that, the Hellraiser storyline to me, or I don't know if everybody who watched it got the same complexity out of it, but it's like if you keep watching the series, they're clearly the Cenobites are not the bad guys. There's always a bad guy in the film that is in contact with the Cenobites, and many times the Cenobites become the retribution against that bad guy. So it's like if you just look at Hellraiser and look at the cover, you're gonna think Pinhead is a bad guy. But if you watch the films, there's multiple times where he actively doesn't commit an act of violence against someone in order to get retribution against someone else.
They also aren't consenting, and he's being observant of that.
For sure.
It's really nuanced.
there's other scenarios where it's like you don't know where the line of consent starts because it was like so many people killed that it's like, were those people all consenting? Or like I think it was Hellraiser 3 maybe. It's like a bar full of people get slaughtered by the Cenobites. But it's like, I think in that context, because they were at the bar, from Pinhead's perspective, they were all hedonists seeking in those pleasures of the flesh. And they just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time to experience the ultimate hedonism.
They didn't realize what they were getting into.
Yeah. And it's like that.
Pinhead's like, I see you're all wearing leather and chains. Excellent. You came prepared.
It's like the genie where you don't know that you've made a bad deal thinking that you're, fulfilling a lifetime wish. And it's that, exploration of, is hedonism harmful as long as it's only practice on oneself? Like, I think that's where that whole philosophical framework is going. So I don't know what the writer's perspective is, but I would assume they're on the side of like pro consensual hedonism. That's just what I would assume, but I'd have to like talk to them.
What'd you think of the latest Hellraiser edition?
Well, and that's where, I think that one it wasn't really in line with the previous iterations. It was more like moving along into the gore porn line. So I didn't even really, like, because it was a reboot, I didn't even really consider that as part of the previous series. And there's some elements of it that carry over, but I think it's the same thing with, like, I never even bothered with the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot because you can tell that they're just like, oh, shiny gore porn, and that's what they think horror is now. So no matter the franchise, that's what they're kind of doing with it. Well, because then, have you seen any of the Phantasm series?
Mm-hmm.
So did you see the recent one? Or it's not recent, the most recent one.
I don't know. I doubt it. Because
I think it was like 2017. So there's this element of, you can tell they're trying to like do the
2016 Phantasm
CGI.
Ravager.
Yeah, it's
that guy's
funny.
Still alive.
Yes, exactly. So the fact that he's still in the movie is like, oh, you just want to watch it just to see what's Reggie up to now. And they do enough in the film. Oh my God. If you've watched them, I think you'll actually really enjoy it for what it is, because there's clearly some satirizing of modern horror films going on in it. It's like unquestionable.
Yeah. I think but it's also by the beginning of Phantasm 3, if you haven't figured out what you're in for, then you're at the wrong movie.
Right. And that's where I think, but even then, the tone between the first one and the third one has even started to shift in taking itself less seriously. And by the time they get to the modern one, they're like, we're not taking ourselves seriously, but we're also continuing the spirit of what we started. Like the tall man being like an old man that's shrinking and still, he's like wearing those fucking heels. It's like, they're acutely aware of their own mortality and their own situation, but they're also having fun with it. And it's clearly something that was done in the spirit of horror films that guy grew up watching, or everybody involved for that matter. So it's like, it's definitely worth watching if you've watched the previous ones.
Yeah.
Whereas like the most recent Hellraiser, I'm like, I don't really know if that's worth actually watching.
Wow, they're still going.
Also, pre-steroid Henry Cavill in Hellraiser 4. When I saw that, I was like, what the fuck? That looks like Henry Cavill's little brother. And then I realized it was Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill's little brother. He hasn't eaten his cornflakes. Or his Weetabix. He's English, right?
Really funny.
It'd be Weetabix then.
Yeah. But there's clearly a pre-steroid and a post-steroid Henry Cavill. Whereas, like, I don't think that's the only film he's done or he did where he wasn't on steroids yet. But once you see him in that film, it's like, holy shit, it's obvious he's juiced. There's no denying that. I don't care who you are. He's definitely juiced.
So last night I watched a Tom Hanks movie called The Burbs.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
Oh, I laughed so hard. Like, there were so many moments. Like, they're in the oddball house, and the guy brings out a bowl full of pretzels and a recently opened can of sardines, and everyone's passing, and then Carrie Fisher's like giving him the nod, like, do it, just eat one of them, and he's like trying to get the sardine out of the can. It's the most awkward scene, and it's complete. There's no background music. It's just the sound of his fingers in this can of sardines. Really uncomfortable. And then of course he puts it on the pretzel and starts chewing on it, and you can hear it all. And I realized this movie doesn't have a soundtrack. Holy crap, I can hear Tom Hanks chewing a fucking sardine. He ate that thing on screen. Probably, or in front of a camera, like probably multiples to get the shot right. Or maybe not. But there was no soundtrack. I mean, there was a score, but it wasn't like constant sound. There wasn't this intense effort to include all these environmental noises to make the scene, borderline ASMR. And it was all dialogue and watching these actors being really uncomfortable. It was hilarious. And so I thought, hey, I'm going to watch another Tom Hanks movie, and I queued up Joe versus the Volcano. Man, they're fabricated Pacific Islander. That's like the most racist shit I've ever seen in a Tom Hanks movie.
Oh God, I forgot about that.
It was horrible. Like I saw it and I started hitting the right arrow key. It's like, nope, I'm gonna skip this shit. I'm not gonna listen to them. They made some fake Islander song to like a Civil War battle hymn. It was real weird. It was like, that was the most uncomfortable Tom Hanks moment I think I've ever had. Watching that movie as an adult. As a kid, I probably laughed my butt off.
Well, there's a lot of shit like that. I mean,
oh yeah.
Every time I watch something and the R word gets dropped, I'm like, oh shit. It happens way more often than, in older media. Like the R word wasn't even, I don't think you even had to be like an R-rated movie to drop it.
Yeah.
Where you're like, it comes up in places where you just wouldn't expect it to. Like, I want to say, like TV shows that were meant for like families to watch, but more leaning into the adult comedy where, there's a lot of innuendo and shit that will claim to be like a family show, even down to like modern times. I didn't realize people considered Bob's Burgers a family show. I thought it was like an
Oh,
explicitly an adult cartoon.
that's not a
Um,
kids show.
but it is. It's a family show to a certain demographic where I'm like, ah, I would
Oh,
never let anybody. If I had a kid, I would never let anybody under 18 watch the
that's
maybe
not a kids
20.
show. Bob's Burgers is totally not a. It's like on the same level as Archer. It's so messed up. The fact that their kids are like able to get into adult level trouble
Right.
doesn't mean that it's about kids.
Right. Not to mention the fact that Bob is constantly getting fucked up and then ending up in situations where it's clearly not meant for a kid to be watching this. Like he became a pimp for trans prostitutes. It's like they smoked crack in that episode.
I like the Archer crossover episode where he's like making burgers and some presumably Russian assassins show up and he murks them. That's my favorite crossover of Bob's Burgers when they do it in Archer style illustration. I like that fan theory that like Bob and his family is just Archer's like real life that he conceals from Mallory because she might be a brilliant spy, but he's actually a spy savant, so he can actually conceal an entire existence from the rest of the world, except for one time when they confront him in his burger shop, and that's like a big no-no because all he needs in there is a spatula. I like that. It's a layer of fun that makes Archer more human and less of a raging alcoholic killer, and makes Bob more than just kind of a urban version of Homer, semi-modernized urban version of Homer.
Well, I don't think Bob has anything to do with Homer. Bob is
Oh, I mean,
like,
just in the sense that he's kind of like has an everyman vibe to him.
but he doesn't, and that's where it's like I don't know how much Bob's Burgers you watched, but it's like Bob is definitely bi. Bob does a lot of drugs. Bob doesn't like his family and is open about it in a way where it's not. I mean, obviously Homer used to like choke Bart and shit, but it's like a different kind of like, oh, I hate you guys. Like you're the worst. Like Homer doesn't do shit like that. He's like, I don't know. I guess I haven't watched it in over 10 years, but he didn't do it in the first 25 years. So that's where I'm like, I I feel like Bob is on the only thing him and Homer have in common is the fact that they have kids. Like otherwise, Bob is a business owner who has no aspiration to get better at business. He's not dumb, he's just apathetic. Whereas Homer's dumb, but he cares a lot. And so there's these things about them where it's like, I think is the fact that they're on Fox also makes it look very, very similar. It's like, oh, what's it called? Bob's Burgers copied The Simpsons homework, but it's like Bob's Burgers is unique enough in its own right. For the most part, they started copying their own formula, but then Great North is where it's just okay. They clearly are just taking Family Guy and Bob's Burgers and smashing them together, and this is now Great North or Great Northern. It's it's too derivative where I'm sure there are things about Great Northern that are like unique, like the what's it called? Alanis Morissette. Um like Alanis Morissette is the philosopher in the sky in the series, which is like it's funny at first, but after a while I'm just like, okay, I got it the first time. It's like, okay. Um or Jewel. I forget who, it's either Alanis or Jewel, one of the two. But there's certain things about it where you're like, okay, this is a good novel, unique show,
Well,
but
I think Jules
it's the
from
same
Alaska
people.
and Alanis Morissette's from like Canada or something, right? Now I'm curious who it is.
Yeah, it's Alanis. Um, it's because Alanis was a huge influence on their lives as tweens, apparently.
Hmm.
So it has nothing to, it's like, doesn't really, it's funny, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to the point where I'm like, I have no idea how the Great North got 4 seasons. I couldn't even remember the fucking name of the show, which is why I kept going back and forth between Great North and Great Northern. But it's like, it's not good. It's not terrible. It's just not, it's not unique enough for it to be on. There's like actually no reason for that show to exist. But the fact that we have it feels like one of those, they're just gonna keep running it because it's in like a time slot where they thought people were watching it.
Does this
But it was
take
really
place in the
just
Bob's
people.
Burgers universe?
Maybe, I don't know. I didn't make it far enough. It's the same writers and producers, and creators. So it's like it's the same people. It's the same animation. It's the same jokes. It's the same beats. It's the same everything, just with different characters. Like it's the same youngest kid who wears a hood, like a animal themed hat all the time and doesn't take it off.
So the fan base says that it's they think that it takes place in the same universe, but this has not been confirmed by anyone who actually writes either story. Although it has a lot of the same writers, so it probably does.
Well, and it's like it's just, it's the same jokes. They basically are like stealing the jokes from themselves and putting them in a different city.
Oh, that's just sad.
It is. It's really sad, which is where I'm like, it's painful. Yeah, because the dude, the dad's name is Beef. So you're telling me you go from a burger guy, now the main guy's name is Beef. It's the most derivative.
Wait, they did not even try.
No. It's like I'm really, I'm obviously anti-capitalist in terms of I'm not any otherist, but the way that capitalism does things like this and then makes itself to seem like it's the most advanced thing to push creativity and push intellectual property when it just encourages derivative
this is
products.
Like the most textbook example of a theme that we've talked about regularly over the last 5 years, is that we're not getting new stories. We're getting, wholesale derivative works. That's not, and this is an example where they barely changed anything. Wow. How can they keep getting away? It's got to be that the stories that they're pulling from are just not memorable.
I think that's part of it.
I bet if Bob's Burgers did like a
part of
whole
it.
season of Outer Limits stories, it'd be like the best season of Bob's Burgers.
Well, on that note, I don't think you're wrong in that some of the best episodes are when they do fucking homage. Like they did they did an episode where they did Alien 2, or I guess it was Alien, as a play in the show. And it was like only a 10-minute long homage, but it was actually really funny. So it's like I don't doubt anthology Bob's Burgers would actually work really well, just because when they do it, it's like some of my most enjoyable episodes. Um, but I think that's where, like, once you have established characters, putting them in like a situational universe can really be fun. So like I always thought it would be fun if Reno 911 did like a crossover season with the Trailer Park Boys, where it's like obviously they're both improv and the subjects of the show kind of overlap a little bit, to the point where it was like that was always my, like, if I could make a fantasy show and like cast two shows and put them together, it was like that was my pinnacle of what I would do. Even though it doesn't have to be comedy, I always thought that would be like, because then, do you remember the X-Files Cops episode?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the greatest episodes of television in television history. It's when they did an episode of the X-Files in the style of Cops. It was fucking, if you haven't seen it, you should just go watch this episode, just because it's hilarious. It's one of the best, like the best amalgamation TV shows ever done since fucking Magnum PI crossed over with fucking Murder She Wrote. But also, it's one of those things where, because these are fake universes, you can put them together. There's no reason. I mean, I guess Cops is a real one, but when I'm talking about in terms of these properties, you can take properties and put them together in ways where it's like, when, to get back to the earlier part, when corporations were flush with cash and they were taking risks, they were like, oh yeah, let's take this elevator lady and give her a whole family, and now we have fucking Family Matters out of Perfect Strangers. Like, oh, this person's got a bunch of charisma, let's take them and give them their own show. And that type of, like, now we got Family Matters and fucking Perfect Strangers and Full House all in the same universe. And it's like, it don't have to cross over all the time. Or what was also Step by Step, I think, was also in that. Because then at a certain point, they put all the ABC TV shows in the shared universe. Once they got far enough, they were like, okay, we don't have anything else. Let's put Urkel on fucking Full House. Let's see what happens. And then Urkel goes on Full House. Everybody loses their shit and loves it. So they keep doing that shit for as long as they can. And it's like that. It wasn't an accident that we got the golden age of media, but the reasons we got it are mainly that the market had enough cash at the time, but due to the fact that they had enough cash, that they were willing to take risks that focused on the properties instead of taking risks that focused on the cash, because they didn't have to worry about the cash. And so that's where, like, I don't know if media can ever get back to that in America, but you see it in other places because they're subsidizing it. So it's like, if the government subsidized creative media and creative endeavors, then we wouldn't have to worry about that. And that's where we would get, like, have you seen, I don't know if you ever watched Twin Peaks at all, but Twin Peaks season 3.
I've not watched the new Twin Peaks at all.
So it's like, David Lynch got a partial grant from the French government because he filmed part of it in Paris. Like, it's not even that much, but it's like, you can tell that because he was not, like, worried about money, that he put all his creative efforts into this work and didn't have to worry about somebody coming and checking on him because there was, like, some shareholder that had to be paid off. And I think that's where, like, I can't point to too many pieces of media in modern times that have that clear creative freedom that's visible in the media. Definitely not video games. And that's where the only place where you can find it in video games is like 14-year-old properties like Star Trek Online or fucking Destiny 2, GTA Online. Um, but that doesn't necessarily lead to innovation so much as like sustaining the progression of that particular group's fun. And it's like good for Star Trek Online, for making sure that their players continue to have fun, because every company doesn't do that. But if every company was worried about the player having fun, then it would be like every game would be as fun as Star Trek Online is to you as someone who enjoys Star Trek Online.
Yeah.
Or it would be that fun to somebody. It doesn't have to be to you. Every game doesn't have to be fun to you, but every game should be fun to somebody.
I'm sure there's a game out there that nobody plays anymore because it just wasn't fun. And Steam just won't take it out of their system. But there's a bunch of dead games out there.
And in that, I don't, games may die or they may be repurposed to the point where like we play Monopoly today in the exact wrong way. Like the fact that Monopoly was created to teach about the ills of capitalism, and now people play it to like be the best capitalist. That's obviously capitalism ruining things yet again. But when I learned that about Monopoly, it made so much more sense. Where I'm like, oh, okay, this is why it only is fun for like the person who wins, and everybody. If you're playing with more than two people, everybody's not having fun except for one person, and that's what it's meant to show you. Like that's what it's supposed to do.
Oh man, it's not a flaw, it's a feature.
Yes.
Well, that's why there's a variation of it called anti-monopoly. When I was young, I think we had a copy of it. It's definitely one of those games that's not in production, that is hard to find. And there was a capitalist and monopolist cards instead of chance cards. And it was so easy just to lose everything. You might lose everything before you get to the around the board once, if you weren't careful. I think it was like the harshest version of Monopoly, actually. It was a game where only the bank wins. Like you could be doing great on the board, but then when you come around and you have to get audited, then all of a sudden it's gone. Then the bank takes over your properties.
They got audits, huh?
Yeah, it's one of the.
That's some serious shit right there. Yeah.
Well, imagine playing a game like Life, and instead of doing it to win, just playing it to have fun.
I don't know if anybody's allowed to do anything for fun under capitalism anymore. It's like that's one of the things to me that I feel the perpetual weight mounting of like, oh, are you having fun? Is it being monetized? Is someone else monetizing your fun? Why aren't you monetizing your own fun? And it's like that perpetual cycle of like,
that sounds paralyzing.
Fuck. I mean, it's not paralyzing so much as like the existential dread of knowing that one can't really do anything without someone monetizing it, trying to monetize it, or in the process, you needing to protect your capacity to monetize it in either now or in the future. Because it's like, okay, Star Trek Online, for example, it's not really forcing monetization. Like you can be monetized in that environment, but they're giving enough of an environment in which someone doesn't have to be monetized in which to exist. So there is this like safe space in there. And I seek these safe spaces where I'm like, oh, I don't want to be monetized if I don't choose to be monetized. And in when I can find those safe spaces, I tend to hold on to them. But it's like there are people in that space around you that have been monetized, continue to be monetized, and then in the process, make your life more difficult as as a person who hasn't been monetized because they gain some advantage by letting themselves be monetized or actively taking part in that system. And that's where I don't it's like a caste system that shouldn't exist in the digital world. Like I do not digital means that there's no physical limitation on that item. Reintroducing money based caste system into the digital world was a mistake. And that's the reason that people like Lars Ulrich want to use copyright protection to keep an asymmetric existence, not because he wants to protect music, because he wants to protect his capacity to be a separate class. And it's like, if it was really about protecting the music, there would be many, many other things that Lars would have done beyond just trying to make it impossible for people to download music for free if it wasn't through the proper source. Like that doesn't actually have a net result of protecting music in the same way as an open source forum would, in that especially you look at Warner Brothers destroying films that never got released. Well, if we had some sort of, I mean, we do have an internet archive, but if there was like a law that said if a company is going to do a tax break or a tax write-off on a completed piece of intellectual property, then that piece of intellectual property has to immediately go into the public domain. You can't just make something, fucking destroy it, and take a tax write-off when it's a creative intellectual property, or at least they shouldn't be able to, but they can now. So that's what I'm like, there are things that are happening that make, sometimes it's more profitable for a studio to destroy a creative property than to just release it into the world. And
so if
not
wait,
okay.
so if a business like a bakery makes, let's say they consume $10,000 worth of materials, but then they decide to throw it into a big tub and fill it with water and ruin the product, they get to write it off?
Yes, unfortunately, that's the way our government works.
That's
Let me make it, and I'm not trying to, it's already dystopian. The problem is shit has happened around us. That's why people will get fired if they don't destroy the food that gets thrown out at the end of their shift, because of those types of rules where our government encourages these corporations to destroy their excess instead of actually just distributing it. Like, oh, there's excess fucking bread. We should just give out this excess bread. No, actually, you should destroy it and then write off your taxes. Wait, what? That doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, to say it out loud doesn't make any fucking sense, obviously. But the fact that our country does this for everything is like, well, no wonder we're fucking destroying the planet, because our government is run by a fucking bunch of idiots who don't understand limited resources, but then want to make it seem like they care about renewable resources. And then, not to harp on NVIDIA, but it's like, I just saw an article where Nancy Pelosi made $900,000 trading NVIDIA stock in the last 71 days. What the fuck does Nancy Pelosi know about NVIDIA? I mean, I know she doesn't know any. I know in the rhetorical question, she doesn't know jack shit about fucking Nvidia. What is Nancy Pelosi doing, making $1 million trading a stock on a fucking graphics processing unit company that makes computer chips that she doesn't know how to fucking use? So you tell, does Nancy Pelosi have a fucking NVIDIA 4070 computer in her office? Fuck no, she doesn't.
Bro, she's got like, you know that she's got some like unreleased, to be released, not even announced yet, 50 series card, and she's just she's just playing like
she's got a Mac. I guarantee she's got a fucking Mac because it's that's what people think is easy to use. She got the most expensive Mac, the probably Apple Pro or whatever the fuck the producers have, that $50,000 machine. She's probably got one of those, and then has Nvidia stock. So that's where I'm like, there ain't no way she's got
barnstorming gaming machine.
No fucking way. Of course not. That would be cool. There's no way that she's done something that's actually cool, because my thing is like the fact that she's out here trading $900,000 of stock in Nvidia. I'm like, I know for a fact you're not a cool person. So there's no way she's got a gaming computer, because there's nothing cool about this person. She doesn't have a cool bone in her body. She's got an exploitative, fucking imperialist, colonialist. Everything about her is exploitative. And that's where I'm like, oh, she's the kneeling, not going to do anything to improve the situation for black people. I'm going to wear this fucking kente cloth and then not do anything. So that's where I'm like, she's really annoying to me, because she's too fucking old to still be doing anything in any workforce, let alone legislating. And in the process, she's making so much money, obviously insider trading on things that she obviously knows nothing about, where I'm like, it's not even about me being like jealous that I can't go make money off of Nvidia stock because I don't have the money. I'm not even an accredited investor, so I couldn't do that legally anyway. And nobody listening to this probably could, because what you have to do to be an accredited investor is so ridiculous that it's like, oh, it's only for upper class people. Like regular people aren't actually in a situation where they can legally invest, but they probably don't even really know that. So some of them may do it, but a person who is an accredited investor is in the 1% already. There's no like middle class accredited investors. It's just impossible because of what, like, you have to have, I think it's like $250,000 in trading profits, or something like $1 million in assets. It's either one, like you can have one or the other. Obviously, if you have both, then you're fine. But it's like, you have to have, because then it's like, how is somebody supposed to have $250,000 worth of trading profits if they're not an accredited investor without breaking the rules?
I just configured a Mac Pro with everything, and it comes out to $24,000. $24,881.49 with free shipping. I'm gonna go configure the most badass Dell there is. I'm sure it's not quite as... Actually, I bet it's pretty expensive. Tower.
Well, I'm sure it's expensive, but it's not gonna... I mean, it might be like half that.
That's true.
Assume.
Okay. How come I can't find it? Oh, it's because I have a JavaScript blocked. Okay. Oh, we're already up to like $5 grand. power RAM. Okay. We're going to start with a Precision 7960 tower. Add a badass processor. Intel Xeon W9 3495X.
Why is this stand for a fucking computer $1,000?
You know, that's a really good question.
Apple's just fucking stealing from people. $1,000 stand for your monitor? Fuck out of here, Apple. Fuck out of here, Macintosh. That is highway robbery. I mean, I guess if you're willing to put it in, it's like fucking consensual, but the idea of people throwing away this much money on a fucking machine, if they're not using it, obviously, to its capacity, because that's where I'm like, I bet this $22,000 Apple is what Nancy Pelosi probably has. That's where I mean, like, I would like if there was a pool of bets on computers, that's where I'd like it. That's the one I would put my money on.
Okay, 2200 watt chassis power. Gonna get the most expensive video card possible. Quad NVIDIA RTX A5500. We want a full 2 terabytes of no. We're gonna get the really fast memory. $100,000 for 1.5 terabytes of DDR5 memory. We're already up to a $122,000 machine. Haven't even gotten to now it's operating system boot drive. We're gonna do 3 to 4 in a RAID 50 configuration. That's right. Mega RAID, $1,000. So it looks like you can build a really insane computer at Dell. I'm not even sure what I would even use this kind of machine for. It's like way overpowered. Sure, additional storage.
What's the cost running for that?
Right now I'm at up to $125,804.23.
Wow.
So yeah, you can.
So they must be building.
This is a workstation. That must
be like yeah.
It's a workstation build. So it's got, whatever processor I've selected. It's got a 56 core Xeon W9 3495 2200 watt power supply for NVIDIA RTX A5500 with 24 gigabytes of memory each, DDR6 memory. 1.5 terabytes of DDR5 error correcting code RAM. Wait, I found a more expensive RAM package. 4 terabytes of RAM.
That's insane, actually.
I can run any database in RAM.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but actually not really in that when you're pointing it out, like NASA's maps probably.
Oh, yeah.
Each up, like.
So 4 times 24, though, that's like 96 gigabytes of video memory. So 96 gigabytes of RAM just for graphical represent. So this is clearly a physical modeling machine. $274,760.81. Ooh, I can get a discount if I sign up for their Apex Managed Device Service contract.
So it looks like the largest picture ever taken was 846 gigapixels. the final image was a result of combining over 31,000 individual images.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Who has time to even look at that?
Right? Or what? Like, what's the monitor that you put that on? The fucking the globe in Vegas.
God, like a 32K. I'm not even sure how that kind of array would work. Yeah, a 32K array of monitors, so you could have the dot pitch, so that you could represent it, and even then, you would never be able to see the whole image at like 1-to-1 pixel resolution. It's got to be some kind of custom, like, projector system to display that image.
So someone made a 102 terapixel image called "The World's Biggest Penis."
Of course, of course.
It's a computer generated image of a phallus. That's Jesus Christ, 4 billion pixels by
all that
3,800 pixels.
All that computing power and all that processing time and all that rendering time was used to render a giant dong. If that doesn't that's like emblematic of...
That sums up humanity
right now. We developed the largest, most powerful video or composite image rendering AI known to man and rendered a penis. What the fuck? Some executives thought that was a good idea too. Bastards.
When's the last time an executive has done something useful? It seems like they don't do anything but ruin shit anymore, where I'm like, man, all I hear about is executives ruining shit. I mean, obviously there's going to be a few exceptions to the rule, but it's like, fuck, man, we don't need executives. That's definitely like an outdated position.
Yeah, that's like a variation of like ambiguous intelligence. How many other AIs can we come up with? We've got algorithmic intelligence, and now we have ambiguous intelligence, and
so then it's like, is the AGI basically like they're giving AI a gen ed degree? Like, it's gonna be good at everything. So
are they gonna call it Jack?
Gonna master nothing, huh?
They're gonna call it Jack, okay. Aren't they? Hey Jack, I need some instructions. Okay, I can give you a hand.
That's like a B student in everything. Well, and
maybe a B student level AI wouldn't be as threatening to people who are afraid of Skynet emerging, because if it can only get a B, it's definitely not capable of organizing on a level that would, result in Skynet.
Well, this shit's never going to happen because they need GPUs and they need energy to make it happen. And those things haven't necessarily peaked, but they can't get to the point where they need to be fast enough to make AGI happen on the timeline that they were trying to imply was happening. And when Altman was trying to hype up OpenAI and make it like, it was obvious that they were pumping and dumping the fucking stock price. But when Altman was hyping it up as if AGI was like, had already happened, and then they came out and were like, actually, no, we have energy limitations that have to be solved before we can hit AGI. And then everybody stopped talking about it. And then they fucking lost a $250 billion on the AI stock prices and stock values. It's this shit is crumbling.
It's interesting is that
train is derailing.
after that happened, Microsoft started that whole initiative to start buying up land in Idaho, and I'm pretty sure that they're building thorium reactors so they can generate the energy necessary for their AI. Google also started building their own kind of power generation subsystems with massive fields of solar panels.
I mean, Ford has their own power plant here.
Yeah,
It's not new, and that's like obviously the direction that it's going. But that's where I'm like, those are the limitations that they're hitting. Which, if they can't, like, the thorium reactor should be the advancement, not the fucking thorium reactor for the AI to then come in and exploit people. Like, it's
we are AI. We are powered by thorium.
And the issue is, Microsoft has to now become a power company to be an AI company. And if they had said that to their shareholders last year, the shareholders never would have agreed.
Like, so that's where what, you're building a nuclear reactor?
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're actually we're shifting into power production. I know we've been working on computing for like ever in our entire existence, but now we're a power company.
Think they could be called Megasoft now?
Megasoft.
Or Macrosoft?
Did you say Macrosoft or just say Microsoft like a hick?
Macrosoft like a hick. Oh no, now I can't unhear it. Oh shit. Yeah, okay, I'm just gonna go with Megasoft for the Microsoft AI electrical power company. Gigasoft. No, Megasoft sounds more like a toilet paper brand. I guess that makes sense with software, though. So, speaking about power and running AI and things like that, I keep thinking about the town in Texas that's experiencing physical ailments as a result of exposure to high sound pressure levels, like sound exceeding 85 decibels, what should be out of range of a Bitcoin mine that's housed at a power production facility. And so they don't have any problems getting enough electricity. They even say that the problems that Texas has are in the distribution and the infrastructure, not the power generation. Which is, that's not really, I don't think that's the core of the issue there. It's more that there are numerous Bitcoin mines all over the country that are all potentially generating the sound of, an entire airport worth of commercial passenger jets taking off all the time, but like 24/7. I just keep thinking about like how much of that is. I mean, I remember having a mine and how noisy it was. Not wanting to be in that room for very long because it just it's like headache inducing after a while.
Yeah, I can't imagine the communities are happy with that. There's no way.
Like, they took over an entire power plant and it's generating enough noise that it's exceeding 85 decibels, like in people's homes, way out of range of the power plant.
Oh, so it's 85 decibels inside people's homes?
It's 85 decibels inside people's homes. It's 85
Jesus
decibels
Christ.
like out in their yard, and they're like, several hundred yards away from the power plant. It's not like, it's not just the people who are, across the street and down the valley who are experiencing it. It's like, or just even across the street, it's like people in the town proper way down the road are experiencing sound in excess of 85 decibels 24/7. That's enough to induce nausea, give people like severe headaches. Apparently, one lady had to put her dog on anti-seizure medication because it was causing her small animal to go into experience, freaking convulsions.
Whoa, and it
People are
sounds like
getting
the wildlife is
nosebleeds.
fleeing.
Yeah, all the indigenous wildlife is left, and these people can't. They want to leave, but they can't sell their homes for anything because nobody wants to buy a house in a noise-rich environment like that. People move to a small town in Texas so they can get away from the city and those noises.
Wow.
And so, like from what I've gleaned, there's basically like a couple of companies that do the environmental impact studies of how much noise is going to be made, and they all like basically they're all just saying like, yeah, it'll be fine. And there's very little oversight because cryptocurrency mining at industrial scale is still relatively new, and it's not regulated because power plants are noisy places anyways, right? Fucking assholes. Going to the airport for just a couple hours to, wait to take off, that's a noise-filled experience. I can't imagine like being around a place where all the airplanes are taking off simultaneously all the time. And they're not getting any real benefit from this.
Sounds like an absolutely horrible experience.
Isn't the government supposed to provide like a safety net or a barrier to prevent things that cause harm to the environment like this?
Not in Texas.
Yeah, apparently not in Texas. Well, there's a power plant. There's one of these crypto mine power plants in Indiana.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's like I think there's like 13 of them nationally. In that Time article, I'm gonna pull it back up and see if I can find it. Oh, nope, I was wrong. 34 large-scale Bitcoin mines range across the United States.
I wonder how many of them are in like Republican areas and how many of those Bitcoin mining farms are not paying taxes. Which then it's like the people locally are suffering and then not getting any benefit from it. At least when people smoke weed, they're paying like 10% tax or something. It's either 7 or 10% tax or something extra, but it's like at least their local community is benefiting. If they don't smoke weed, they're still benefiting from it. That don't seem to be the case with the Bitcoin shit.
Oh, the readings were taken near the Bitcoin mining facility that reached 103 decibels. That's an airplane taking off. That's a small airplane taking off, even not even a big one. That's like a light rock concert volume.
Well, because then I'm like, how loud is it inside the facility? Like, how are people able to operate in there? What kind of ear protection I mean, not even just ear protection, like they got to be wearing some shit to
protect their bodies.
Right. Are they wearing like bomb suits into there?
They probably remotely deactivate the mine to go into work on it. It's probably done by some dude sitting in their command center at home in like a Dallas suburb or something, just hanging out. It's like they get a little message say, hey, turn the system off, we've got to go check something, and they turn it off. And then the people who go in to do the maintenance, they never even look at a monitor. They just tell the person things are ready to go and to, run their tests or whatever. $34. Yeah, some of the complaints were from people who lived as far away from 8 miles.
Well, I'm wondering when all these machines are going to start breaking down and not be in a position to be replaced, because it's like I don't. There's no way that ASIC miners are still that profitable to sell. So I can only imagine it's like maybe one or two companies left doing it. Obviously, in China, there's going to be a bunch of little independent like producers that can sustain it for a while at least. But
oh yeah, there's
America,
some guy in China who's like, hand making their computer chips for their ASIC mines,
right?
And like, pouring their own circuits and on like hand drawn traces, and they've got an atomic process that allows them to extrude like, the finest, most capable ASIC miners imaginable. And like that's the kind of stuff I see. Like I watch videos of guys in like Pakistan doing, welding or welding on a big ass truck, or rebuilding an alternator, or rebuilding a battery, like a car battery. And they're doing this in the dirtiest conditions, welding with sandals on, and there won't be a market for this stuff after a while, because unlike a big truck where almost everything is relatively serviceable within reason and can be managed with like 50s era dirt level tools, computers aren't like that.
Holy shit! So Bitmain is selling shipping containers full of ASIC miners for 70 grand now.
Oh wow. I bet they're all at like end of life.
Right.
I bet they're all like they only have like 5% of their remaining manufactured till fail hours left. All those things are going to power up one time, and they're going to run great for that first time, and then the first time they have to, the owners of those miners have to do any kind of servicing and take it offline, like 30% of those mines won't start up again.
Customers need to prepare a 20-ton crane to load and unload.
Oh my
god.
What are you doing today? I'm receiving shipment of 20 tons of ASIC miners.
Wow. A 1-year warranty on these things. There's a $100,000 unit with a 1-year warranty.
They stand by their product.
Let's just say that's going to end well.
They're not going to get their money out of that. There's just not enough time.
No fucking way.
There's not enough time. There's just not enough time for proof of work to recoup $70,000 plus like getting it wherever, the handling and installation time that they have to recoup. And it's probably like a year from receipt, not like a year from the first time they power on.
Right. Or a year from ship date. Who knows?
Yeah, a year from packaging date. Well, these were packaged in 2019, so they're no longer under warranty.
What? They say total annual revenue $1 million, but it's like,
no way.
Why would they sell it if they can build it and sell it for $100,000, but it makes $1 million a year? Why wouldn't they just? That's It's the shit like that that annoys me about capitalism.
Wait.
Like,
Maybe they can make $1 million in a year if everyone else on Earth turns off their Bitcoin mines.
right.
If they're the only miners in existence, then yeah, sure, why not? Like that'll ever happen.
Yeah, it's wild to watch the market try to figure out other ways to make like what ways are left to make money. Like reselling seems to be coming to an end for various reasons in that there's more and more laws against, or not against, but put in place to make it so that reselling isn't as profitable. But then it takes, because of the amount of work it takes to resell, like the types of things people are reselling are changing quickly and dramatically, like those Stanley cups that had the lead in them. Like that was the most recent massive resale market. Whereas it seems like people are getting away from tennis shoes and like not so much tickets for events, because they definitely still scalp tickets, but Ticketmaster has made it so that it's like way more difficult to get away with it and actually make it worth it. So it's like interesting, the GPU resale market is basically non-existent.
As it should be.
Right, yeah, for sure. There's other things like I guess I would collectibles to a degree are resale markets.
Yeah.
But it's like collectibles are starting to recede a little bit since the COVID boom, but it's still like I feel like that's the the most stable resale market, in that it boomed during COVID like other resale markets, but it's not receding as quickly as other ones. Well, because I'm like
Here's
I
a
remember.
30. Here's a system with a 3080 card and a 12th gen Intel i7 card for $1,000.
Well, because wasn't there a period where you were like doing reselling, where you were able to make money off of reselling random shit, but it's like it wasn't even a specific type of like one
Oh no,
brand thing.
yeah, that's more like just like financing my audio electronics hobby. Is
Right, but
is
in
making
terms of
smart
like
decisions and getting good deals and then selling them when the market says, "Hey, this is people are buying this thing."
right, but that's what I mean. Like when you're able to do that, there's a certain liquidity that's in the market that makes it so that if you buy something, you're also able to move it because the market's liquid. Whereas right now, I don't think every market is liquid in
Yeah.
ways that people are getting locked up with things that they would have been able to move maybe two or even a year ago.
So during pandemic, I noticed that there was this big surge for where people were buying up audio recording preamps, and there's a lot of new stuff being released because it was everything was leading up to pandemic, and then pandemic happens, and all of a sudden the development kind of slows down because no one can go into work, and so a lot of these things, the prices of like preamps, analog hardware, just outboard equipment in general, started going up, and things started becoming unobtainium, and announced hardware started becoming vapor, and then just vanished because, lo and behold, the market didn't exist long enough for it to be brought to market. And I think that there are a lot of industries, consumer markets, that have been impacted in ways that they still have yet to recover from. And I think some industries are more stable than others, but only in the short term, because they're able to do, like the automotive industry. They stopped making affordable vehicles and started pushing fully loaded vehicles. But it turns out that a lot of young people who are they're buying cars that are more optioned. And so statistically, and just following the numbers, the auto manufacturers are making fewer of the less optioned vehicles because they're just not even selling as many of them. First-time car buyers apparently in the last 5 years have been buying vehicles with, CarPlay and Android Auto and other advanced technology packages. Like, these things becoming the standard, or they should just be the standard to begin with?
That's definitely true. But I think at the same time, it's like auto companies had to create separate classes within their vehicles, so it would be things like that would be the extra step up, and leaning on that. They could only do that for so long before the tech became too cheap for them to use that as like a means to create separation. It's like everything should have that, even down to the lowest class at this point.
They should, but still not all of them do.
Right. Which is like, why is a car being sold with like an AM/FM radio or some shit? Like instead of a
HD radio,
just straight up touchscreen satellite radio. There's probably actually a tablet. Tablets are too cheap for that not to be the case.
So I installed a CarPlay Android Auto head unit in the truck, and it's basically a tablet with a moderately powered 4-channel amplifier attached to it. That's all it is. It has like the most basic operating system, and it's all touchscreen. It was cheap. It was $44. They made money on it too at $44. And it sounds good. It sounds better than the Sony head unit that it replaced. And so these things aren't expensive. Technology is super cheap. None of these things should be options. They should just be included. There's no reason that, well, I guess there is a reason that sometimes they have really complicated designs because they have to fit behind crazy plastic. And some manufacturers are integrating those giant screens into strange shapes. Like, I think Audi has a car that has their entire dash is a display. Maybe it's Mercedes.
I think Audi and Mercedes definitely. Even I think Hyundai might have some like that too, like the Ioniq.
Oh, I expect Hyundai to have that kind of stuff now. They're like the most technology-laden vehicles, Hyundais and Kias.
But everything has like LEDs on the inside now. So it's like LEDs becoming cheap. It's like, everything should have LEDs now because it's not expensive to fucking put a strip of LEDs on, the runner in your vehicle or on the door or whatever, or both for that matter. And I'm seeing people installing the lights in their wheel wells, and that shit's getting cheaper and cheaper. It's like, it's not super expensive now, but like 3-4 years ago, it would have been too expensive for a regular person to get wheel well lights. But now it's just, you can go fucking buy it on Amazon.
Let's see, how much are rock lights? Rock lights, $40 for a set of 10, 16 for a set of 4, 19 for a set of 4, 35 for a set of 8, 45 for a really advanced multicolor setup. The first one is also multicolor. Yeah, that's undercarriage lighting is so affordable now. It's kind of, and there's no glass. It's all plastics and LEDs, so there's no glass issue anymore. Every car should have undercarriage lighting. 'Cause, I mean, you can, 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 you can,
It should have adjustable undercarriage lighting.
Yeah.
I'll go one step further.
Yeah. Full spectrum adjustable undercarriage lighting with like that that knows how much light you need and where you need it when you need it. So if you open the door, it knows like, oh yeah, we want to make sure there's not a puddle right next to us. What I would really like is a temperature sensor, like that faces down, so I know what the temperature of the road is. Like a laser temperature sensor.
Yeah, that'd be super useful during the winter.
Oh, that'd be great. Just anytime it's getting chilly, once it crosses that 40-degree threshold and tires start behaving strangely, it's nice to know that stuff. It doesn't even have to be an actual readout of temperature, although that would be the best solution. But it could just be a warning, the road is cold kind of light indicator. Watch out, reduced traction because it's cold. I'm holding a laser thermometer in my hand that I got from Amazon. I think it was like $20. Let's see how much a laser thermometer costs now on Amazon.
Oh, they can't be that expensive now.
No.
Lasers have gotten so cheap.
$8.
Yeah.
Yeah, $8. Well, maybe I have to do that. Maybe that's something I have to do. Maybe I have to buy one of these things and disassemble it and retrofit it into my vehicle so I can have a ground-based temperature readout.
Which at that point, it's like, you build one and then you've just made a prototype that could be. This gets back to the original point. Yeah, it's like you would be ridiculous not to then monetize that in this economy if you actually made a successful working model. Because it doesn't really exist, which is like, it's unfortunate because that would be super useful, but nobody's figured out a way to make money on it yet. So that's where it doesn't really exist. You got to hack your own.
Well, that just settles it. I'm just going to make my own road.
That would be so useful. Because it doesn't have to be on all the time.
No, it only takes a reading when you press the button.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be on all the time. In fact, having it on all the time would just be annoying. You'd see a readout of the ground, like changing temperature. Probably wouldn't even change temperature after a while. It'd probably be consistent after a while.
Well, especially when you're moving at high speed.
Yeah. But even then, there's these, these things have like you can adjust for range, and then there's another deviation control that you can adjust for environmental factors. Lasers are crazy, like that they can derive all of that information from the way that the beam of light is disrupted. I mean, that's some straight up NASA technology right there.
Yeah, fucking photons, man. Mysterious.
I mean, let's see. It was not invented by a single person. Liars. There's definitely a single person who figured that out. They're just not getting credited.
Well, that's where like I feel like the single genius inventor was always a myth. It always feels like some shit that needs to be invented or discovered would take multiple people's understanding.
Sure.
And like the Albert Einstein myth of like the genius.
Well, I mean, he was like a part of a team.
Right. I mean,
well, I mean, I don't think
who else was on his fucking team.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mean that to say that there was one actual individual who led to the discovery that they could like infer temperature from a laser beam, but someone figured out, I was like, wait a second, I can carry this thing around and I can use this. This has other applications. Or a group of people came up with it. Probably definitely a group. I just want one that's shaped like a flashlight, not a gun. That shouldn't be that difficult. Not everything needs to be a gun.
Right. Oh my God. You know, on that note, phasers are so forward thinking, but it's also like, it seems ridiculous when we have guns. But the phaser, I feel like, was a superior shape, because then when you go back to like the gun shape, you realize it's not a phaser is going to be more accurate because of the way that it's being held, versus a gun is going to have to be modified to make it more accurate with the natural motion. So that's where I'm like, I'm not saying that we should move to phasers as a society. Obviously, that's going to be a long time, but the gun shape is just, it feels so arbitrary, and like it hasn't. There were periods in the 1800s where they would like mess around with it, but it doesn't seem like anybody's really done a lot of modification on the handle shape in a while to be like, okay, this is actually an improvement. Versus the phaser is clearly an improvement.
Oh man, we're never gonna get the phaser though. They're never gonna let us have that. They've stopped with the tricorder variation of the smartphone. Exceptional Radio. And that's it. Exceptional Randos shows produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.